When we picture the Ukraine war, it's all trenches, tanks, artillery, and drones. Lots of drones. But amid the chaos, an unexpected figure steps forward, emerging from the smoke, carrying no rifle, no grenade, just faith.
Да будет воля Твоя, как на небеси и на земле, хлеб наш насущный дашь нам днесь, и остави нам долги наши, как же мы оставляем должником нашим.
Спаси, Господи, люди Твоя, и благослови достояние Твоє.
Тебе, Боже,
І захищу його, бо він знає ім'я моє. Буде кликати мене, я почую його. Буду з ним.
Military priests play a far greater role than most people realize. Because in this war, both sides don't just fight for territory. They believe they're fighting for something sacred. There's this scene in the movie Best in Hell that captures this perfectly. A Ukrainian soldier crosses himself before an icon. The wall detonates. Seconds later, a Russian soldier picks up the same icon and crosses himself as well. Actually, both sides claim to have God on their side. This is a real Deus Vult moment. On both sides of the line, they bless troops before battle, console the broken, and reinforce the belief that the cause they're fighting for is just. Essentially, these priests are boosting the morale of entire formations. There was this priest that explained how he talked to some prisoners of war and convinced them to switch sides, just like in Age of Empires. Now the chaplains don't hide in the rear. They're right in the trenches with the troops, exposing themselves to enemy fire. As a matter of fact, many have already fallen on the battlefield. Others cross the line into active combat.
Lord, forgive the work I must do this day.
This Russian priest left his quiet village to participate in Operation Pipeline. At first, he blessed everyone going in, but then he joined them and crawled through the pipeline with these assaulted detachments, sharing their hardships, the lack of air, his boots full of mud, and above all praying for the success of the mission. So today we're diving deep into the untold story and real impact of military priests on both sides in the Ukraine war. What you're gonna see in this video, you're not gonna see it anywhere else. Now, while priests strengthen the soul, your body still needs to be taken care of as well. Your bone marrow stem cells production decreases after 40. That's not an opinion, it's biology. Your bone marrow is where your body makes repair cells. Cells that rebuild muscle, repair blood vessels, and help your body recover when something breaks down. But with age, your production drops, and your body literally stops healing itself. Recovery from any injury takes forever. But cocoflavanols change that signal. This powder wakes your stem cells up, like an alarm clock. It signals to your bone marrow to wake up and start releasing repair cells again. Before you roll your eyes, check out what Harvard scientist Dr. William Lee had to say.
If you actually give people who have coronary artery disease, so they've got narrowing of their blood vessels and stiff hard blood vessels, if you measure their stem cells and then see how many stem cells are floating around their blood, which is not many, then researchers have given them 2 cups of dark chocolate in the form of hot chocolate. That's it, 2 cups to have a day for 30 days. And at the end of 30 days, you take out your blood and measure the stem cells again, and then do that flow medium dilation resiliency test again of the blood vessels to see have they changed. This is what's amazing has been found. That dark chocolate, the proanthocyanidins, not only got into the bloodstream, but they doubled the number of stem cells circulating in your blood vessels, and they doubled the resiliency of your blood vessels just over the course of a month with as little as 2 cups of hot chocolate that's dark.
That's right, dark chocolate. But most of the flavonols in chocolate get destroyed during processing. If regular chocolate has 50 milligrams of dead flavonols, this Black Forest high flavanol cocoa powder has 1,200 milligrams of pharmaceutical extracted flavonols. This is extracted from the highest quality cocoa to grab the highest concentration of flavonols and flavonoids, which are going to activate your stem cells to come out of your bone marrow. If you constantly feel tired, your bone marrow needs a wake-up call. To help you, Black Forest opened an exclusive 48-hour access window. Right now, when you get their high flavanol cocoa, you're getting NMN completely for free. But that's not all. By clicking the link in the description below, you get 40% off on high flavanol cocoa and a full $100 NMN product for free. Don't hesitate, stocks are limited. Get yours now by clicking the link in the description below. Because if you don't, you're not gonna get the discount. My friends, this video is a result of months of research. At first, I wanted to make a simple 10-minute video about this topic. But then I fell into the rabbit hole and I just discovered more and more things. There was just too much to say. And then my autism did the rest. Anyway, I hope you will enjoy this special episode. But before talking about military priests in the Ukraine war, we need a quick history lesson.
Let's go, in and out, 20 minutes adventure.
In Russia, priests were mentioned in military manuals as early as 1647. However, it's only later that the institution of military clergy, including regimental priests, emerged as part of broader reforms to create a modern regular army and navy in the Russian Empire. This process began under Peter the Great in the early 18th century, but true standardization would take another century, as it's only under Alexander I that every regiment was required to have at least one priest. By the way, a couple of years earlier, one of Russia's greatest generals, Suvorov, even stated, "Strengthen the spirit and the faith of our fathers." To teach a faithless army is like sharpening burnt-out iron. The Russian Orthodox Church played a pivotal role during the Patriotic War of 1812, or Russia's defense against Napoleon's invasion. On top of conducting religious services, these military chaplains were to instill victorious spirit, patriotism, honor, and dignity to the troops. Priests could also feel the morale and the general mood of the troops. Unlike with their officers, soldiers could open up and talk about their emotions in a relaxed way with the priests, without fearing to be put against the wall. This tradition continued during the 20th century. For example, during World War I, 2,500 Orthodox military priests were awarded various orders for valor as part of the Russian army. Russian General Brusilov wrote the following words during the Great Retreat of 1915. In those terrible counterattacks, among the soldiers' greatcoats, black figures flashed. Regimental fathers, tucking in their robes and rough boots, walked with the soldiers, encouraging the timid with a simple gospel word and behavior. They remained there forever, on the fields of Galicia, without separating from the flock. During the Great War, a reported 40 of them would fall on the battlefield, but the real number is probably much higher. One of them was 35-year-old higher monk Matveyev. Just for the quick definition, a higher monk is a monk that is also a priest. On July 7th, 1915, the grenadiers in Matveyev's regiment were fleeing. The entire battle line was breaking. At that moment, Father Matveyev stepped forward. He addressed his fellow soldiers with a passionate pastoral sermon. He reminded the soldiers of their duty to fight for Russia and God. Then, without hesitation, and to lead by example, he advanced towards enemy lines. The cross was raised high in his right hand, its dark outline cutting against the smoke. As the attack went in, he blessed the advancing men, but in doing so, he stood fully exposed. A moment later, he was struck down and remained on the field. Inspired by his fearlessness, the grenadiers returned to their positions and launched a fierce bayonet counterattack against the Germans. And there are countless other heroic stories like this one. But everything changed during the Bolshevik Revolution. In 1918, the institution of military and naval clergy in the Russian army was abolished, and all military priests were dismissed. During the subsequent Russian Civil War, the Red Army replaced spiritual guidance with political commissars. And during the 1930s, the Russian Orthodox Church was subjected to brutal persecution by Soviet authorities. Churches were destroyed, relics confiscated. Between 1937 and 1941, tens of thousands of clergymen were executed. Many others were held in prison camps. The Russian Orthodox Church was nearly destroyed. Surprisingly enough, and quite ironically, it's the German invasion of the USSR that saved it. And not in the way you think. All this because of one man. On June 22, 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa against the Soviet Union. The head of the Orthodox Church, Metropolitan Sergius, addressed all believers with a message. He could have said that the prayers have been heard and that liberation was coming soon. But instead, he stated that the fascist bandits have attacked our motherland. The pitiful descendants of the enemies of Orthodox Christianity want to once again try to bring our people to their knees before injustice. The Church of Christ blesses all Orthodox Christians to defend the sacred borders of our motherland. This statement was intended to boost the morale of the nation, but also somewhat to reassure Soviet authorities who were quick on the trigger with the clergy. And you know what? It worked! There exist pictures of Orthodox priests with Soviet soldiers, but these images are very rare. As you can imagine, such events went directly against communist ideology. Here you can see Soviet soldiers being blessed by a Russian Orthodox priest sometime during the Great Patriotic War. In this one, an Orthodox priest addresses Red Army soldiers around 1943. Or in this one, where priest Korchevsky urges partisans to study military science to quickly defeat the enemy, somewhere in western Belarus in 1942. Such scenes would have been unthinkable just a couple years before. But it's also important to remember that the resurgence of religion was tolerated also because of the disastrous situation on the front line. Soviet forces were in full retreat, and the morale of the army, of the nation, was collapsing. The NKVD and political commissars could only do so much to rally the troops. That's why reports indicated that under enemy fire, some Soviet soldiers turned to the old faith. As the saying goes, there are no atheists in the trenches. There are many anecdotes flying around. There was this poem found in the overcoat of a simple Soviet soldier, Andrei Zatsepa, who fell somewhere in the steppe in 1942. The paper said, "Listen, God, I have never spoken to you in my life, but today I want to greet you. Farewell, my God. I'm going and I will hardly return. How strange, but no, I'm not afraid of death." Within the ranks, there was also a paradoxical combination of both Soviet and Orthodox principles. Here is a letter from soldier Cherkasov that started with, "Mom, I joined the party," and that ended with, "Mom, pray to God for me." And that's not all. Many stories mention how parents blessed those going to the front with crosses and icons. And of course, there's also the famous story of General Vasily Chuikov, the commander of the Soviet 62nd Army during the Battle of Stalingrad. After his death in 1982, a handwritten note was found tucked in behind his Communist Party membership card. It said, "Oh, the one who can turn night into day and earth into a flower garden, make every difficult thing easy for me and help me." According to his son, in 1942, before departing to the front to take command in Stalingrad, Chuikov visited his parents. His deeply religious mother gave him a blessing, a cross which he reportedly wore under his uniform, and she asked him to copy this prayer. He placed it behind his party card to keep it safe and close. But there's also another anecdote from his son. During intense moments of the Battle of Stalingrad, when the situation seemed hopeless, entire Soviet divisions were melting away within 24 hours. General Chuikov felt the urge to cross himself, but because of all the stress and anxiety, his fingers remained clenched into a fist, so he reportedly crossed himself with his fist until victory. This gives you an idea of the strange cohabitation between Soviet atheism and personal faith during the 1940s. Or for example, after a big battle, one Soviet officer is reported to have said, "I don't believe in God, but God helped me." Now, what about our military priests? Well, check this out. Hundreds of clerics ended up in the trenches. Of course, as part of the Red Army, they had to remain discreet, but informal spiritual support occurred privately. For example, priest confessor Luka Krymsky became the chief sergeant of the Krasnoyarsk Field Hospital in October 1941, performing 3 to 4 surgeries a day. Others sat in the trenches with the infantry, like monk Pimen, no other than the future patriarch of Moscow and head of the Russian Orthodox Church. When the German panzers rolled through the Soviet border in June 1941, Pimen was exiled in Central Asia for anti-Soviet beliefs, only to be drafted 2 months later at the age of 31. Due to his past education, Pimen went through an accelerated officer training course. after which he was promoted to junior lieutenant and subsequently to platoon commander. In March 1942, he was appointed Assistant Chief of Staff for Logistics of the 519th Rifle Regiment. Apparently, everyone knew he was a former priest, but the critical situation made it that nobody really bothered him. For now, in May, the Soviets launched a big offensive against Kharkov, but soon enough, everything crumbled when the Germans under von Manstein counterattacked on the flanks. Soviet positions were turned and Pimen's regiment found itself encircled. There are multiple versions of the story, but essentially the troops knew they were doomed. GG, well played. But instead of turning to their political commissars, the soldiers went to Pimen and said, "Father, pray for us. Where shall we go?" Pimen pulled out an icon of the Mother of God that he secretly kept, and he prayed. All of a sudden he rose and pointed towards an exit. The men around him broke the encirclement, and they were saved. Naturally, many historians believe this is a simple post-war legend, but what we know for sure is that according to the archives, Pimen was indeed wounded multiple times at the front. Then he did get in trouble in 1945 for being a cleric, but that's another story. The point I'm trying to make is that to ensure further support from the Orthodox Church, Stalin's 1943 decree restored the Patriarchate.
Into the breach!
In turn, the NKVD momentarily stopped persecuting priests, and sometimes they even protected churches. This wasn't a kind-heart gesture by Stalin, but a calculated political move. German occupation allowed churches across Ukraine to reopen after severe Soviet repression, leading to some sort of religious revival. And most importantly, free manpower for the Axis. A byproduct of this was the Ukrainian 14th Waffen-SS Division Galicia. Most of its recruits reflected the Greek Catholic majority in Galicia, and from what I could read, it was the only Waffen-SS division that was allowed its own military priests, many of whom fell on the battlefield. It's also important to mention that during German occupation, the Germans granted clergymen freedom of movement, believing the Orthodox Church was their ally. That's how many priests helped develop the partisan movement behind enemy lines, as we've seen earlier with this picture of priest Korchevsky. This allowed the clergy to supply the partisans with food and report on German movements, and sometimes even working hand in hand with the NKVD. Here you can see the commander of the 5th Leningrad Partisan Brigade, awarding the Partisan of the Patriotic War second-degree medal to priest Puzanov. One anecdote describes an NKVD officer surviving an artillery bombardment and telling a priest sitting next to him, "It seems your God is protecting us too." Let's be honest, it would make a great movie. A priest and his former executioner working hand in hand to defeat the enemy. However, if it was a Netflix production, the two men would be working cock in hand. For their acts of courage during the Great Patriotic War, over 100 priests and clergymen were awarded medals. But religion was again suppressed right after the war, especially as Khrushchev launched a renewed ideological assault. In the end, the Soviet state stopped trying to destroy orthodoxy as long as it remained invisible. For example, that's why we don't have any traces of military priests being involved in the Soviet-Afghan war. This historical background was important because nobody else around me would be interested in it, and of course for you to understand that it's only in the 1990s that military priests resurfaced in Russia, and it's quite a miracle. Namely in the Chechen wars, where chaplains provided ad hoc spiritual support to the troops. For many of these soldiers, it was their first contact with religion. But formal reintroduction of military priests would only come in 2009. This leads us directly to the Russia-Ukraine war, with this sudden resurgence of military clergy in both countries. Ironically, both claim to be fighting a holy war against fascist forces.
That man's an imposter! That man is the imposter!
During my research, I was surprised to observe how religious iconography could be seen everywhere within the armed forces of Ukraine. For example, at the end of this intense edit of the 25th Armored Brigade for Ukraine's Independence Day, we see the Kiev Monastery of the Caves and the monument to Prince Volodymyr holding a cross. The symbolism of this is self-evident. The visuals link Ukraine soldiers to their faith and history, highlighting courage, protection, and national heritage. However, from my observation, while faith and military chaplains definitely play an important role in Ukraine, they remain secondary to history and the broader ideal of an independent Ukrainian nation, rooted above all in Ukraine's Cossack past. One of the best examples of this can be seen in the work of the Ukrainian singer Kozak Sirmaha. He's heavily involved in the war effort, making one song after another dedicated to various Ukrainian brigades. One of his songs was titled Nushbo, and it emphasized a religious dimension, urging, "Come on, guys, everyone to the army, come on for God's work, come on, let's hold on, come on with God to the battle." It also frames the homeland as sacred. Here's our best land, it is given to us by God. Don't you think all this religious symbolism to be strange in a country where the majority of the population identifies as atheists? It's simple: chaos, death, and fear. That's where military priests and chaplains of the armed forces of Ukraine step in. On July 1st, 2022, the military chaplaincy service became an official structure within the AFU. Put simply, a chaplain is a military serviceman, but remains a clergyman who must help a soldier find meaning in sometimes very difficult circumstances. Actually, with this new reform, the position of chaplain is considered to be an officer position. As for their duties, they're relatively the same as 2 centuries ago: provide spiritual care and administer religious rites like baptism, communion, and the divine liturgy. Act as a trusted companion. Help soldiers manage stress, anxiety, and emotional strain, and promote moral values that strengthen unit cohesion. And all of a sudden, Ukrainian soldiers flocked towards military priests for spiritual guidance. Here from October 1st, 2022, a chaplain reads passages from Psalm 91 to the troops around
У
him.
скорботі визволю його і прославлю його. Довгим життям обдарую його і дам йому спасіння моє. Во ім'я Отця і Сина і Святого Духа.
Psalm 91 or Psalm 90 in Eastern Bibles is one of the most martial and protective psalms in Christian scripture, sometimes even referred to as the soldier's psalm. His partner follows with a compressed battlefield ritual, marking the soldiers' foreheads with a cross of chalk for protection. There's also this video from March 2023 where we see a Ukrainian priest blessing an entire battalion marching towards the front line.
Слава Україні!
On this one, the chaplain says something very simple to the troops. I'm asking you that all of you come back alive. Pray a lot out there. One of the key figures of this religious support for the troops is 37-year-old Father Alexander Lyushenko, the chaplain of the 30th Mechanized Brigade. That's when I realized that every Ukrainian brigade has its own team of chaplains. Just like a century ago, the Russian army had regimental priests. In this footage, we can see priests visiting the 4th Tank Brigade to pay tribute to all the soldiers that died defending Ukraine. On the 25th of December 2024, the chaplain of the 25th King Danilo Motorized Rifle Brigade held a Christmas service for the soldiers. There is even this interesting ceremony for the 155th Mechanized Brigade from October 2025. We see Chaplain Senior Lieutenant Ihor Bihun blessing or consecrating the brigade's battle flag during the Feast of the Protection of the Holy Virgin, a day traditionally revered by Ukrainian Cossacks as the patronal feast of warriors. And you see once again this connection between faith and the independent state of the Cossacks. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, does the Azov Brigade have military priests? I guess they prefer Norse-inspired rituals, but that's another story. Anyway, unlike other soldiers, Father Alexander carries no weapon, only a cross on his body armor. He says that his main mission is to provide moral support to the soldiers and listening in order to understand their mental and spiritual state. Father Alexander also said it was a great honor for him to conduct baptism rites right on the front line. In this article by Army Inform, we can read, during his last 2 rotations, he baptized 4 Muslims. He added, I quote, I did not insist on it in any way. The guys themselves came to me and asked for it because they felt a spiritual need for it. After putting on the crosses, I asked them only one thing, that they believe in Jesus Christ with their hearts. Look, let's be honest, in the middle of a war, many guys will do anything to just get plus 10% of divine protection. Here we can see Father Alexander leading an Easter service. He has been on and off the front since 2014. He recalled 2014, 53rd Brigade, 3rd Battalion. On the second or third day, I was in the trenches with the guys. We were being covered by 120mm mortars. The guys said, "Father, thank you for being with us. Thank you for praying and for being together right in those trenches." The soldiers added, "We know for sure that we will not die because you are with us and God is with you." The shells fell literally 5 or 6 meters from us, but everyone survived. Everything is fine. And again, we can be sure that the majority of these guys have never stepped foot inside a church in their lives. But it goes to show the importance of military priests on the battlefield. As you can see, many chaplains prefer to be where the troops face danger and need encouragement. As a result, he was already wounded several times at the front. One time after a direct artillery strike on his dugout, to which he said, "We were being thrown around. We dug ourselves out of the dugout for an hour and a half." Or recently explained how a Russian FPV drone chased him down. Back to the 1930s, eh? Now, I'll take a moment to explain something important. The majority of Ukrainian chaplains are affiliated with the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. But there are also some Catholics for the populations of Western Ukraine and even some Protestants. Meanwhile, priests from the Ukrainian Orthodox Church that are affiliated to the Moscow Patriarchate, they're perceived as outlaws, and they're often bullied by Ukrainian authorities, as many of them are seen as Russian spies. So you won't be seeing them on the front lines. I'll end with this video with the chaplain of the 33rd Mechanized Brigade. He's delivering greetings on the feast of Archangel Michael, the patron saint of soldiers and defenders. The chaplain honors all those standing guard over peace, justice, and truth, emphasizing Archangel Michael as a symbol of heavenly courage and protection against dark forces. And get this, Russian forces are invoking Archangel Michael as well.
О, великий архангеле Михаиле, победи вся противящаяся нам силу честного, животворящего небесного креста Господня. Молитвами Пресвятой Богородицы, святителя Николая Чудотворца. Аминь. Встать!
A couple weeks later, near Avdiivka in December 2023, Father Viktor Lenok prayed in front of an entire company of Russian soldiers. Once again, probably their first interaction with a priest in their life. Before letting them depart for an assault, he performed a ritual, sprinkling holy water over the entire unit. You can observe how some of them hold a Russian Orthodox military banner. This one is famous for being the banner Tsar Ivan the Terrible used during his 1552 conquest of Kazan. As you can see, it bore the same image of Christ and symbolized divine protection and victory, with Jesus Christ conquers written in Greek. Actually, here we see another military priest with a Sturm detachment in January 2024, right before being sent into battle, and they're holding the same red Jesus flag. So right away we can see how Russian forces observe faith in a different way than Ukrainian soldiers. For them, they're the direct descendants of all Russian history. And that's why some soldiers will go through all these rituals with a big USSR patch on their shoulder. Not only that, it's very common to see Russian military personnel fly both the religious banner and the flag of the Soviet Union side by side. It's as if German soldiers from the Bundeswehr would fly the modern German flag, and the Father Viktor Lenok ended his sermon by saying,
Когда свет в сердце воссияет, и вы должны вернуться с победы домой и передать этот опыт мужества, жертвенности, самопожертвования, верности, честности детям. И стали уже возрождение Святой Руси.
Is it me or this really sounds like some sort of crusade? So we saw how chaplains bless soldiers, but Russian military priests also bless fresh tanks coming out of the factory going to the front. Why does this feel so much like Warhammer? It's literally the tech priest. But it's not as odd as you might think, because check out this picture from 1915, where we see a French Catholic priest blessing an aircraft. If I was to fly in this, yeah, I would also ask for multiple rounds of divine blessing, yeah. Overall, the striking observation is that faith and the sacred occupy a much more central position on the Russian side. For example, my last video was on the battles for Siversk. If you haven't seen it, link will be in the description below. Well, it turns out at the beginning of the year, the 7th Motor Rifle Brigade wanted to celebrate its victory over the Siversk salient by raising a giant cross overlooking the battlefield. I haven't seen anything like this on the Ukrainian side. Meanwhile, military priests are omnipresent in the Russian narrative. Yet, contrary to the armed forces of Ukraine, they're rarely attached to one specific unit. Most of them come and go between their hometown and the front. That explains why in this article from Russian state media TASS it says how over 2,000 priests have visited the area of combat operations. As a matter of fact, Russia's military clergy reported only about 340 full-time positions. I think the explanation is pretty straightforward. There's simply not enough Orthodox priests in Russia. That's why they come and go between their hometown and the front. And that explains why in spring 2025, the Russian Orthodox Church launched a program to train more military priests. Nonetheless, it's in this war, the Ukraine war, that Russia's military clergy officially was reborn. Because on the 7th of June 2022, the Russian Orthodox Church's Holy Synod revived the pre-1918 senior leadership position of proto-presbyter of the military and naval clergy, a rank that had been abolished after the Bolshevik Revolution and the Soviet secularization of the armed forces. Just like in Ukraine, Russian chaplains hold officer positions. Meanwhile, 50-year-old Father Nikolai frequently visits field hospitals to provide moral support for the wounded. Every post was very proud to announce that Father Nikolai and his wife were raising 7 children. I mean, this guy is single-handedly repopulating Russia. The War Gonzo team actually interviewed him. He said that he arrived at the front in August 2022 and explained that his objective is to spiritually shepherd the fighters, sharing with them the hardships of military life. He also explained that the first mission of these regimental priests is to conduct liturgies or prayer services. To do so, 150 dugout churches have been opened across the entire front. As a matter of fact, many of these underground churches are the only places on the front with AC units. And priests are joking around by saying that's how they attract a lot of people, even atheists and people from other religions. Time to get baptized. No, I have AC. Father, I'm ready. Then military chaplains can administer Holy Communion to the troops. They explain that it's in difficult times like these that religious rituals are most useful. Religion is meant to comfort and heal the hurt souls of men. Priests are also present for servicemen that want to confess, as well as the sacrament of baptism that is performed on those who wish. Surprisingly, it's a lot. For example, on the 25th of February 2025, the Moscow Times announced that 42,000 soldiers of the Russian armed forces were baptized directly at the front. At last, military chaplains organize and conduct major religious celebrations, including Christmas, and of course, there's also Easter. Last year, priests brought Easter bread to the troops, and it was reported that 45 liturgies were performed along the entire front. But due to the range of drones, most ceremonies nowadays have to take place multiple kilometers away from the front. And you'll understand why in a minute. That's where I want to tell you about Deputy Chief Military Chaplain Pyotr Gritsenko. One of the units he visits a lot is the 40th Marine Brigade of the Pacific Fleet. Wait, did he just bless the motorcycles? This is getting out of hands. In a recent interview, he was asked, what about the soldiers who are not religious? He explicitly said that his job is essentially being like a missionary in a crowd of atheists. That says everything you have to know. Unlike in the past, modern Russian troops are not really religious. Now he says he likes to share the hardships of the troops. Maybe, but I think he ate an entire brigade's worth of Easter bread by himself. Oh, guys, the Easter bread got stolen on the way. Jokes aside, from all the interviews of Russian military priests I had to go through, Chaplain Pyotr Gritsenko stood out for the clarity of his explanations. Other than that, in the following article, we can also learn that 27 Russian military units bear the names of saints. But those are mostly volunteer formations like the Seraphim of Sarov Battalion or Alexander Nevsky Battalion. But there's no regiment or brigade that bears such a religious tone. Oh, actually, I forgot, there's one. The 14th 28th Saint Sergius Motorized Regiment. I'm pretty sure that's the largest Russian unit that bears the name of a saint, and they were really proud to announce that they built a chapel within only 9 days. I think I even mentioned them in one of my previous reports. Actually, I'm not sure, but here we can learn that it's in August 2024 that the regiment chose Sergius of Radonezh as its patron saint. Now, like everywhere around the world, some clerics have weird takes that they recorded and published online. So as Russian forces in Kursk were fighting side by side with the North Koreans, this priest told men of the 810th Sebastopol Marine Brigade to not listen to the atheistic speeches of their North Korean allies, as God will punish them for it. Although they don't bear names of saints, there are two Russian units that truly embody the sacred aspect of this war. The first one is the 15th Motor Rifle Brigade, also nicknamed the Black Hussars of Alexandria. I mentioned this formation many times, as they spearheaded the offensive from Avdiivka towards Pokrovsk. For example, new recruits are first required to kiss the Russian flag, then the banner of the Black Hussars, followed by blessing from the regimental chaplain, and finally kiss the icon of Saint Alexander Nevsky. I haven't seen any other Russian unit go through such a ceremony and ritual. It's truly unique. They even show the picture of the typical set of a frontline priest. As you can see, faith is truly part of their identity. It plays such a central role in this 15th Motor Rifle Brigade that it even hosted an exhibition titled Regimental Priest of the Russian Army Past and Present in St. Petersburg. The slogan of this brigade should really be for God, Russia, and the Tsar. But there's a second one. Technically, it includes all the Cossack formations, but more specifically today, the Terek Cossack Brigade. On July 10th, 2024, for the first time in Russia's modern history, it was reported that Cossacks installed the first Cossack warship cross in the zone of the special military operation, and many others followed after that. They explained that this is a symbol of the affirmation of orthodoxy, faith, and statehood on the liberated lands. Shortly after, Russian news media Ridovka published a 35-minute documentary on the Terek Cossacks. This Cossack ataman said that Cossacks go where their homeland is in trouble. I quote, "We don't start anything without prayer. We do not make decisions before consulting God. Up there, they decide for us." And this is the main definition of Orthodox warfare. It really sounds as if they're fighting a holy war. And then the chaplain of the brigade said, "A priest in the area of combat operations has the following responsibilities. He's a second in command, a political officer, an assistant commander for personal matters, because he can talk with the troops in a very relaxed way. They can open up without judgment. They sit down and talk to their friend, like their ancestors 200 years ago. Nothing has changed." Military chaplains play the same role. Naturally, an important part of the mission of military priests is preparing soldiers for combat, offering spiritual guidance as they confront fear, violence, and the possibility of death. Check this out, Russia's chief priest of the special military operation is this man, Archpriest Dmitry Vasilenkov. In an interview, a journalist asked Father Dmitry if he wasn't afraid of death. He replied, "Only fools aren't afraid." He was then asked, "There's a saying that there are no atheists in the trenches. Do you think that's true?" Father Dmitry replied, "Fear of death motivates religiosity, but that this is an unorganized and spontaneous religiosity. A person simply wants to live, and they begin to cling. They begin to seek God's help. They begin to turn to God. It's a spontaneous cry, a surge of religiosity within a person." Similar to that story of that NKVD officer I told you about during World War II. Actually, I remember this anecdote also comes from Father Dmitry. That's not all. He then talks about this story he witnessed recently. One of them said, "Father, we were hit by an enemy attack and I fell into this ditch. I'm lying there, so desperate to live, so scared, and I'm just screaming, 'Lord, help me, Lord, save me.' And there are two non-religious guys in my battery. And then they yell at me, 'Sashka, pray for us too.' To me, that sounds very similar to the story of the Ukrainian chaplain Father Alexander. But now it's time to prepare the men for battle. Archpriest Vasily Sudilov blesses assault stormtroopers from the Arikiari regiments before a combat mission. Then he wraps the soldiers' hands with prayer ribbons to provide them with protective spiritual armor. The soldiers end the ceremony by kissing the icon held by the priest as part of receiving a blessing. Here from another video we once again see Father Zudilov as he's handing icons of the Savior and the Virgin Mary to a group of soldiers. In Orthodoxy, icons are seen as windows to heaven, physical representations that make the invisible spiritual reality present. Let's take a step back and talk about these prayer ribbons. Some argue that part of the Russian army's latest successes can be attributed by purity seals inspired by the game Warhammer 40k that the soldiers wear in combat. Now, this is blasphemy, right? But for the church, this presents itself as an opportunity. So for maximum damage points, the prayers from Warhammer were changed for Psalm 91 and of course blessed by the church. I mean, of course, the flock is lost and priests are there to shepherd them in the right direction. Now before battle, regimental priests perform the same sacraments. But in that moment, they really carry the weight of life and death. In the following video from January 2024, there's Father Viktor Lenok, the one we saw earlier. He's with a squad of Russian soldiers that receive communion from him before going on with their mission. Here we can see how a chaplain ends the ceremony by hugging soldiers before their departure for battle. In this one, late at night, Father Nikolai administers confession, communion, and words of admonition. Then it was reported that at 4 o'clock in the morning, the men went on to attack enemy positions. And if chaplains are not present, well, the soldiers continue the ritual on their own. This assaulted detachment commander explained that before storming Vuhledar, the command gathered 15 groups of 8 men. However, before launching the attack, they all prayed and crossed themselves. It was important enough for him to mention that to the journalists. Some priests have no other choice but to become active participants in hostilities. For example, this priest from Kursk did not hesitate to fire his shotgun at FPV drones while evacuating civilians from the region. Meanwhile, others willingly joined the fight.
Lord, forgive the work I must do this day.
That's the story of Father Alexei Sripkin. He mentioned that he's a veteran of the Chechen Wars. That's actually the first time he met a priest and confessed. Although he is originally from Kursk Oblast, he became the rector of a church in Kaluga. But everything changed when Ukrainian forces invaded Kursk Oblast in August 2024. Father Alexei reached out to one of his friends that was fighting in the Kursk direction, and he asked him how he could help. His friend explained that their current priest's contract was ending, and that they need a replacement. That's how Father Alexei left his cozy home in Kaluga Oblast to go to the front. At first, he said that he supported the troops by helping with the logistics, medical evacuations, engineering work, even digging trenches. That's when he learned of Operation Pipeline, literally the day before it started. He said the commanders had a huge mock-up of the entire pipeline and they were preparing a battle plan. Father Alexei blessed as many troops as possible. But then he told himself that he couldn't let all these men face danger on their own, so he decided to join them. He was among the last to enter because he was part of a medical unit meant to ensure the proper evacuation of wounded soldiers and the smooth delivery of supplies. Nonetheless, that's how he crawled 15 kilometers through the pipeline. At first, they used electric scooters pulling carts to go faster, but then the scooter of the priest's 20-year-old son was out of battery. Yes, you heard that right, his son is serving in the same unit. Then he laughed by saying that they had to push the scooter and the cart through the mud until the next rest area. During this journey through darkness, many soldiers came up to him and asked, "By any chance, are you a priest?" And when he would reply yes, they would ask for a blessing and confess. For many of these men, it was their first time meeting a priest. Just like Father Alexei himself, 30 years ago in Chechnya. Father Alexei explained it by saying, "When you're at war, the enemy is close, but God is even closer." And guess who showed up at the end of the operation? Father Dmitry. And we can clearly see that there's some sort of all-stars team of priests going all across the front. But as you can imagine, by going to the front, chaplains also expose themselves to enemy fire, sometimes at the cost of their own life. For example, former paratrooper and military chaplain Archpriest Mikhail Vasiliev was reported KIA on November 6, 2022, at the age of 51, during the Ukrainian counteroffensive in the Kherson region. It was reported that a HIMARS rocket exploded 3 meters from him and he was mortally wounded. On the 13th of May 2025, another one also fell in Kherson. Priest Sergei Vaida, father of 11 children. I mean, this guy is single-handedly repopulating Russia. It was reported that he fell while shielding a wounded soldier from an enemy drone. And the day before, on the 12th of May, is 32-year-old father Anton Savchenko that was reported KIA after a HIMARS strike. The question is, how many fell in total? It's hard to say, but multiple dozens at least. Already by December 2022, Patriarch Kirill named 5 military priests who had died while performing their pastoral duties in the zone of the special military operation. Actually, there's another Russian cleric that fell, but he was a Buddhist, Lama Bayer Darmaev from Buryatia. In the spring of 2024, Bayer Nikolaevich signed a contract with the 5th Tank Division and was sent to the North Military District. He died on October 23, 2024, in the village of Zolota Niva in the Volnovaha district. What's interesting is that in many Russian units you have a mix of religions. So naturally you have also chaplains for Buddhists and Muslim soldiers, just as portrayed in this recruitment video, where we see Christians, Muslims, and Buddhists being shown on screen. And you might ask, what about the, let's not talk about that. Another example of this multicultural society, during the ceremony of medal awards for the capture of Uruzhaine by the 5th Separate Guards Tank Brigade, we see representatives of all 3 major religious confessions. In Tatarstan, 55% of the population is Muslim and 40% Orthodox. And the same can be seen in the demographic makeup of the troops from that republic. And that's why when visiting formations from Tatarstan, you often have both a priest and an imam traveling together. Although what made me laugh is that in the following Telegram post, it said that Muslims happily celebrate Christmas with us. Look, press X for doubt. I mean, it's possible, but I also know that Russians are big trolls. Before I forget, on a side note, you can see how the average age of this Russian unit is quite high. So if in Tatarstan the majority of the troops are Muslim, in Buryatia that we just covered, the majority are Buddhist. In this footage, you can get an exclusive look at how Russian Buddhist paratroopers from Buryatia celebrate the Lunar New Year with a ceremony led by Lama Bater. But overall, from what I could observe, Muslim and Buddhist chaplains are less numerous, or at least they're rarely shown on screen. And it's also obvious that there's a clear hierarchy. Orthodoxy is always shown first and above the others, but always with respect. I know it sounds anecdotal, but I couldn't find any post on Russian Telegram channels where we see Russian Muslim soldiers celebrating Ramadan or Eid. The only interview I could find is this one by War Gonzo of Imam Rafiz Harzat of the 506 Guards Motor Rifle Regiment. In the video, he explained how he was holding a prayer session when enemy UAVs circled above. He didn't hesitate, he picked up a rifle and shot down the incoming drones. So, in conclusion, the Ukraine war led to a resurgence of religion on both sides. Military priests remind us that even in a war defined by modern technology, men still carry fear into battle. Unlike officers, chaplains act as entrusted friends. Their presence alone can turn the tide. Helping soldiers endure the hardships of war, help them find meaning despite all this violence, and pushing them beyond their physical limits. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.